1 in every 2 people watching this video right now is performing at least 3 of the 5 habits I'm about to describe every single day without the slightest idea that those habits are accelerating cellular aging, destroying the lining of their cardiovascular system, and quietly recruiting the biochemical conditions for chronic disease. Let me say that again because I need that to land. Every single day, not occasionally, not on weekends. Every morning you wake up, pour your coffee, sit at your desk, scroll your phone, eat your lunch, and statistically, you are doing damage that your body is desperately trying to compensate for, silently, without a single warning symptom, sometimes for decades. This is the most dangerous kind of harm, not the kind that sends you to the emergency room, the kind that shows up as a sudden heart attack at 54, the kind that presents as unexplained fatigue that 5 doctors dismiss, the kind labeled as idiopathic, medicine's polite way of saying, we have no idea, and frankly, we stopped looking. These 5 habits are normalized. They are celebrated. They are embedded in productivity culture, in hustle culture, in the architecture of modern life itself. And that is precisely what makes them so lethal. You cannot fear what you cannot see. And the system, I'll get into this in a moment, has absolutely no financial incentive to make you see it. I want to be direct with you because respect means telling the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. The healthcare system in most of the developed world is not, I repeat, not built around keeping you well. It is built around a revenue model that requires you to be sick enough to need intervention, but not so sick that you die before generating more billing cycles. Your physician, and I say this without malice because most doctors are genuinely good people trapped in a broken architecture, your physician has, on average, 7 minutes with you per appointment. In those 7 minutes, they are legally required to document within specific diagnostic codes established by insurance carriers. There is no billing code for patient chronically sleep-deprived due to phone use. There is no reimbursement for sedentary lifestyle causing progressive endothelial dysfunction. There is no insurance claim for mitochondrial impairment secondary to hyperpalatable ultra-processed diet. But there is a billing code for hypertension, for type 2 diabetes, for coronary artery disease, and there are enormously profitable pharmaceutical protocols for each of them. I am not anti-medicine. Acute medicine is one of humanity's great achievements. But chronic disease management, the management of conditions that are largely lifestyle generated, is one of its greatest failures. And you deserve to know that before we go any further. What I am about to show you costs nothing, requires no prescription, no procedure code, and it works at the level of your actual biology, not at the level of symptom suppression. Before I go deeper into the physiology, and we are going deep today, this is not a surface-level video. I need to ask you something. If what you have heard in the last 2 minutes resonates with you, if you have ever felt dismissed by a doctor, if you have ever sat in a waiting room with a stack of symptoms and walked out with nothing but a referral and a copay, then this channel exists for you. We are 94,000 subscribers away from 100,000, and I know that sounds like a vanity number. But every subscriber on this channel is a real person who now has access to information that the system is structurally disincentivized to give them. Every single one counts, so if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now. It takes 2 seconds, and it genuinely changes the reach of this work. Hit the like button too. It tells the algorithm that real people find this valuable, and it pushes this content toward the people who need it most. Now, let's get into the biology, because this is where it gets extraordinary. Habit number 1, chronic sleep fragmentation. Let's start with the one that everyone knows is bad and almost no one takes seriously: fragmented, insufficient sleep. I am not talking about occasionally staying up late. I am talking about the chronic, socially normalized practice of sleeping 6 hours or fewer, waking from alarms before your sleep architecture is complete, and doing it again the next night and the next for years. Here is what is happening at the cellular level that your doctor's 7-minute appointment will never cover. During deep, slow-wave sleep, specifically stages N2 and N3, your brain activates what researchers at the University of Rochester identified in 2013 as the glymphatic system. This is essentially your brain's lymphatic drainage network, and it is almost exclusively active during sleep. The glymphatic system clears metabolic waste products from interstitial fluid, including beta-amyloid plaques and tau protein aggregates, the very molecular debris that, when it accumulates over years, becomes the structural foundation of Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative conditions. Every night you cut your sleep short, you are leaving your brain's waste management system partially incomplete. The trash doesn't get taken out. It accumulates, slowly, invisibly, over decades. Simultaneously, sleep deprivation triggers a cascade in the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis. Cortisol, your primary stress hormone, follows a diurnal rhythm that depends on sleep for regulation. When sleep is fragmented, cortisol secretion dysregulates, remaining elevated during periods when it should be suppressed. Chronically elevated cortisol damages the hippocampus, the memory and spatial navigation center of your brain, through glucocorticoid-mediated neurotoxicity. It also directly promotes visceral adiposity, insulin resistance, and systemic inflammation via upregulation of NF-κB pathways. But here is what I find most alarming, and this is not a theory. It is a documented physiological reality. Sleep loss of just 1.5 hours per night for 1 week measurably reduces natural killer cell activity by 72%. Natural killer cells are your immune system's first response oncological surveillance team. They identify and destroy mutated precancerous cells before they can proliferate. You are not just tired when you sleep badly. You are immunologically compromised every single night. The second habit is one that has been in the research literature for over 15 years under the clinical descriptor sedentary behavior, and it is still almost completely absent from mainstream medical conversations. Sitting for more than 8 continuous hours a day, which describes the average office worker, the average remote employee, and the average retiree watching television, produces a specific and measurable cascade of endothelial damage that is entirely independent of whether you exercise for 30 minutes in the morning. Let me explain the endothelium because it is one of the most underappreciated organs in the human body. The endothelium is a single-cell thick layer lining the interior of every blood vessel in your body: arteries, veins, capillaries. If you unfolded it flat, it would cover the surface area of 6 tennis courts. It is not passive plumbing. It is an active endocrine organ that produces nitric oxide, regulates vascular tone, modulates immune signaling, and prevents thrombotic clot formation. When you sit for prolonged periods, particularly with legs dependent and blood flow slowed, you dramatically reduce the shear stress on endothelial cells that stimulates nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that produces nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is to your blood vessels what WD-40 is to a rusty hinge. Without it, the endothelium becomes pro-inflammatory, pro-thrombotic, and begins the process of fibrosis, the stiffening and thickening of vessel walls that underlies hypertension, atherosclerosis, and ultimately, cardiac events. A landmark 2012 study published in Diabetologia found that even among people who met the recommended 150 minutes per week of moderate exercise, those who sat for more than 8 hours per day had a 90% higher risk of type 2 diabetes than those who sat for fewer than 4 hours. The exercise didn't cancel out the sitting. This shattered the compensatory model of health completely. I want you to consider something. Right now, as you watch this video, there is a reasonable probability that you are mildly dehydrated, not dangerously dehydrated. You are not about to collapse, but operating at a fluid deficit of 1 to 2% body weight, a level at which research consistently demonstrates impaired cognitive performance, reduced kidney filtration efficiency, elevated blood viscosity, and compromised thermoregulatory capacity. Most people drink when they are thirsty. The problem is that by the time the thirst mechanism activates, you are already at that 1 to 2% deficit. Thirst is a lagging indicator. It is like checking your oil light. By the time it comes on, damage is already occurring. Chronic low-level dehydration forces the kidneys to concentrate urine, increasing the osmolality of tubular fluid and creating the chemical environment in which kidney stones form. Over years, it accelerates the decline of glomerular filtration rate, the speed at which your kidneys filter blood. The kidneys have remarkable compensatory capacity. You can lose 50% of kidney function before a single blood test shows anything abnormal. This is not reassuring. This is terrifying. Dehydration also elevates plasma viscosity, literally thickening your blood, which increases the mechanical workload on your heart, raises your resting heart rate, and multiplies the probability of thrombus formation in vulnerable coronary vessels. Your brain is 73% water. A 2% fluid deficit produces measurable reductions in working memory, attention, and psychomotor speed. You are not just a little foggy, you are cognitively impaired, and you are caffeinating through that impairment, which, as I'll show you in Habit 4, creates its own downstream disaster. Caffeine is not energy. I want to be very precise about this because the entire global beverage industry depends on you believing otherwise. Caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist. Adenosine is a neuromodulatory molecule that accumulates in your brain throughout the day as a byproduct of cellular metabolic activity, specifically as ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is consumed. The more adenosine that binds to its receptors in the basal forebrain and other sleep-promoting regions, the stronger your drive for sleep. This is called adenosine pressure, and it is your body's legitimate, biologically essential signal to rest. Caffeine does not give you energy. It occupies the adenosine receptor, blocking the signal, so you cannot feel the fatigue that is objectively, measurably, biochemically present. The adenosine is still accumulating. The cellular fatigue is still there. You have simply disconnected the warning light from the dashboard. The engine is still overheating. When caffeine's half-life clears, which takes 6 to 8 hours in most adults, and up to 12 hours in those with genetic variants in the CYP1A2 enzyme, the accumulated adenosine floods the now vacant receptors simultaneously. This is the crash, and it is not a sign of caffeine withdrawal. It is the deferred biological reality of your actual exhaustion, arriving all at once. The deeper problem is that habitual caffeine consumption, particularly the pattern of consuming caffeine before the body's natural adenosine clearance during sleep is complete, disrupts the slow-wave sleep architecture discussed in Habit 1, further reducing glymphatic clearance, further elevating cortisol, and creating a biochemical spiral that requires ever-increasing doses of caffeine to maintain baseline function. You are not energized. You are borrowing neurological capital at compound interest, and the debt collector is called adrenal fatigue, anxiety disorder, and insomnia. The final habit is the most physiologically complex, and in my clinical opinion, the most devastatingly underexplained piece of the modern health crisis. The mitochondria, those organelles you learned about in high school biology as the powerhouses of the cell, are not simply generators. They are the central nodes of your cellular metabolism, your apoptotic signaling, your reactive oxygen species management, and your inflammatory regulation. Mitochondrial health is not a niche wellness concept. It is the biochemical foundation of whether your cells function or degenerate. Ultra-processed foods, defined by the NOVA classification system as industrial formulations containing ingredients not found in home kitchens, such as emulsifiers, artificial colorants, modified starches, hydrolyzed proteins, and synthetic flavor compounds, directly impair mitochondrial function through multiple documented mechanisms. First, the extreme glycemic load of refined carbohydrates, white flour, corn syrup, maltodextrin, floods the mitochondrial electron transport chain beyond its processing capacity. This creates a condition called mitochondrial uncoupling, in which the proton gradient that drives ATP synthesis is dissipated as heat rather than captured as energy. The mitochondria spin at high speed, producing little useful output while generating enormous quantities of reactive oxygen species, superoxide radicals that damage mitochondrial DNA, which unlike nuclear DNA has virtually no repair capacity. Second, the ultra-processed food supply is engineered by teams of food scientists, I have read their internal documents, to simultaneously over-deliver on sugar, salt, and fat, while under-delivering on fiber, polyphenols, and the micronutrients required for mitochondrial enzyme function, specifically coenzyme Q10, B-complex vitamins, magnesium, and alpha-lipoic acid, all cofactors without which the electron transport chain cannot function at efficiency. Third, emulsifiers such as carboxymethylcellulose and polysorbate 80, extensively studied by Dr. Andrew Gewertz at Georgia State University, directly disrupt the intestinal mucosa, the mucosal lining that separates your gut microbiome from your bloodstream. When this barrier is compromised, bacterial endotoxins, specifically lipopolysaccharide or LPS, translocate into systemic circulation, triggering a chronic, low-grade inflammatory state that has been causally linked to insulin resistance, atherosclerosis, depression, and neurodegenerative disease. Before we get to the protocol, and I promise it is coming, I want to address one of the most stubbornly persistent myths in the health space, because it directly enables 3 of the 5 habits I just described. The myth is this: as long as I exercise, I can offset the effects of everything else. This belief is clinically false, and I say that with full awareness of how much people invest in it emotionally. Here is what the research actually shows. Exercise is profoundly beneficial for cardiovascular health, metabolic function, neuroplasticity, and longevity. I prescribe it in every clinical context. But the concept of exercise offsetting has been serially dismantled in the literature. A 2019 meta-analysis published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine, which synthesized data from over 1 million adults, concluded that while exercise significantly reduced mortality risk, it did not eliminate the independent hazard posed by prolonged sitting, poor sleep quality, or high ultra-processed food consumption. These are physiologically distinct mechanisms. Aerobic exercise improves VO2 max and cardiac output. It does not repair glymphatic clearance deficits. It does not restore endothelial nitric oxide production in the extended sitting windows between workouts. It does not repair mitochondrial DNA oxidative damage from repeated glycemic spikes. The mechanisms are separate. The damage is additive. The exercise is necessary, but it is not sufficient. And it is not a trade-off currency you can spend to purchase the habits I just described. This is what I actually want you to take away from this video. Not fear, information, not paralysis, a protocol. Here it is, step by step, starting tonight, not next Monday, tonight. 1. Set a consistent sleep anchor time, the same time every night, including weekends. This is not optional. The circadian oscillator in your suprachiasmatic nucleus synchronizes to consistency, not total hours alone. 2. 90 minutes before sleep, eliminate all blue spectrum light exposure. Wavelength 480 nanometers. This means no phone screens, no tablets, no LED overhead lighting. Use amber or red spectrum bulbs. Blue light suppresses melatonin secretion from the pineal gland at concentrations as low as 10 lux. 3. Take 400 milliliters of elemental magnesium glycinate, not magnesium oxide, poorly absorbed, with a small glass of warm water 45 minutes before your sleep anchor time. Magnesium activates GABA receptors in the brain, promoting slow-wave sleep depth and reducing cortisol release during the first half of the sleep cycle. 4. Lower your bedroom temperature to between 65 and 68 degree MIB, 18 to 20 degrees side. Core body temperature must drop 1 to 2 degrees to initiate and maintain deep sleep stages. This is not comfort preference, it is thermoregulatory physiology. 5. Every 45 minutes of sitting, stand and perform exactly 10 calf raises, 10 bodyweight squats, and a 30-second brisk walk to the far end of your space and back. Total time, 90 seconds. This is sufficient to restore lower limb blood flow velocity and trigger a measurable pulse of endothelial nitric oxide release. 6. Set a recurring timer, phone, watch, anything, at 45-minute intervals during your workday. Do not rely on memory. The behavioral barrier must be architectural, not motivational. 7. If possible, elevate your workspace to allow 20-minute standing intervals per hour. This alone, in a study from the University of Chester, reduced post-lunch blood glucose spikes by 43%. 8. Immediately upon waking, before caffeine, before food, drink 500 ml, approximately 17 fel-Oz, of room temperature water with the juice of half a lemon and a pinch, roughly 1 to 8 teaspoons, of high-quality sea salt or Himalayan pink salt. The sodium and trace minerals prime the sodium-potassium pump in your intestinal epithelium for rapid absorption. The lemon provides citrate, which binds urinary calcium and dramatically reduces kidney stone formation risk. 9. Consume a minimum of 35 milliliters of water per kilogram of body weight per day, roughly half your body weight in pounds, converted to fluid ounces as a rough approximation. This is your personal minimum, not a ceiling. 10. Set hydration anchor points, 500 millimol at waking, 250 millimol at mid-morning, 250 millimol at lunch, 250 millimol at mid-afternoon, 250 millimol at early evening. This distributes intake across your biological absorption windows and prevents the bolus drinking that overwhelms renal reabsorption capacity. 11. Delay your first caffeine intake to 90 to 120 minutes after waking. During this window, cortisol is naturally elevated in its diurnal peak, your body's own arousal signal. Introducing caffeine during this window creates adenosine receptor competition that blunts the cortisol peak and accelerates afternoon energy crashes. Waiting until 90 minutes post-waking after the cortisol peak begins its natural decline produces dramatically more stable energy throughout the day. 12. Cap total daily caffeine at 200 mg. For reference, one standard espresso is approximately 63 mg. 1 8-O's brewed coffee is approximately 95 mg. 13. Establish a hard caffeine cutoff at 1 p.m. if you have a standard sleep anchor time around 10 to 11 p.m. This respects the 6 to 8 hour half-life and ensures caffeine has substantially cleared your adenosine receptors by sleep onset. 14. For 30 days, eliminate one category of ultra-processed food per week. Week 1. Eliminate all beverages except water, black coffee, and plain tea. Week 2. Eliminate packaged snack foods. Week 3. Eliminate fast food and restaurant fried foods. Week 4. Eliminate commercial bread and refined grain products. This graduated approach dramatically reduces adherence failure compared to cold turkey transitions. 15. Each main meal should follow the fiber-first sequencing rule. Begin with 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil on a bed of leafy greens before any carbohydrate source. Research from Stanford demonstrates that consuming fiber and fat before carbohydrates reduces postprandial glucose peaks by up to 73% and blunts the insulin spike that triggers mitochondrial uncoupling. 16. Add 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and 1 teaspoon of turmeric to one meal daily. These 2 kitchen staples provide lignans, omega-3 ALA precursors, and curcumin, a potent NF-κB inhibitor that directly reduces the inflammatory gene expression cascade triggered by LPS translocation from gut barrier disruption. I want to tell you about a patient. I'll call her Margaret. Not her real name, but her story is entirely real. She came to my clinic 14 years ago. She was 47, a secondary school administrator in a busy district, 3 children, devoted to her work. She walked in with a folder, and I remember this clearly. A folder containing the results of 7 separate specialist consultations over the preceding 2 years. Cardiologist, borderline hypertension, begin monitoring. Endocrinologist, pre-diabetic, dietary modification advised. Gastroenterologist, irritable bowel syndrome, likely stress-related. Neurologist, tension headaches, consider amitriptyline. Rheumatologist, mild fibromyalgia, pain management referral. 2 GPs, anxiety and depression, SSRI prescribed, 7 specialists, 6 diagnoses, not one of them the same system, not one conversation between them. And Margaret was sitting across from me in tears because she had done everything that was asked of her and she felt worse every single year. I sat with her for 2 hours that first appointment, not because I am extraordinary, because that is what the problem required. What I found was this: Margaret was sleeping 5.5 hours per night, waking to a 6 a.m. alarm after midnight emails. She sat at her desk for an average of 10 hours per day with no structured breaks. She drank 3 to 4 large coffees beginning at 6:30 a.m. and stopping at 4 p.m. She consumed perhaps 800 ml of water on a good day. Her diet consisted primarily of staff room biscuits, canteen sandwiches on white bread, and ready meals because she had no time to cook. Every single one of the 5 habits, in full, every day, for years. We built a protocol almost identical to what I just described to you, gradually, systematically, not a radical overhaul, a 5-week graduated shift, 1 intervention per week. I checked in with her monthly. By month 3, her resting blood pressure had dropped 18 points systolic without medication. Her fasting glucose was back in the normal range. Her gastroenterologist noted a remarkable spontaneous resolution of her IBS, which was, of course, not spontaneous at all. It was the LPS translocation clearing as her gut barrier repaired from the dietary changes. Her rheumatologist, to his considerable credit, called me and said, "Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." By month 6, Margaret described herself as a different person, not the absence of symptoms, the presence of herself. That distinction matters enormously to me. She still sees me annually. She brought me a card last year, 15 years into what she calls her real second life. It said, "Thank you for treating the person, not the paperwork." I keep it on my desk. Now I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to actually answer this in the comments, because it genuinely shapes the content I create. How old are you? Drop your age in the comments right now, just the number. Because here is the truth. The 5 habits I described today do not affect a 28-year-old the same way they affect a 52-year-old. The mitochondrial reserve capacity of a 35-year-old is substantially higher than that of a 61-year-old. The glymphatic clearance rates, the endothelial repair capacity, the HPA axis resilience, all of these decline with age, which means the urgency of the protocol is physiologically stratified. If you are in your 20s, you have an extraordinary window of opportunity. The biological debt is small, the interest rate is low. Start now and you are buying decades. If you are in your 40s or 50s, the urgency is higher, but so is the capacity for reversal. The research on endothelial regeneration, mitochondrial biogenesis, and gut barrier repair is genuinely extraordinary. Your biology wants to heal, it simply needs the conditions. If you are over 60, this is not discouragement. Some of the most dramatic transformations in my clinical experience have been in patients in their late 60s and early 70s who finally received the physiological explanation they had been denied for decades. The mechanisms still work. The timeline is simply tighter. So, your age. In the comments. Right now. I read them, and I use them to decide what we cover next. Let me summarize what we covered today, because the science is dense and I want it to stay with you. 17. Chronic sleep fragmentation, specifically fewer than 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep, impairs glymphatic clearance of neurotoxic waste, dysregulates the HPA cortisol axis, and reduces natural killer cell immunity by up to 72%. It is not fatigue, it is accelerated neurodegeneration. 18. Prolonged sedentary behavior, sitting more than 8 hours continuously, damages the endothelial lining of your blood vessels by suppressing nitric oxide synthase, driving vascular fibrosis and prothrombotic inflammatory states that no amount of gym time can fully compensate for. 19. Chronic low-grade dehydration operates below the threshold of conscious thirst while impairing kidney filtration, elevating blood viscosity, and producing measurable cognitive impairment that most people attribute to stress or personality. 20. Using caffeine as a sleep surrogate does not create energy. It blocks the adenosine receptor, masking accumulated cellular fatigue while progressively disrupting sleep architecture and escalating adrenal stress burden. 21. Ultra-processed food consumption triggers mitochondrial uncoupling, generates reactive oxygen species that damage mitochondrial DNA, and, via emulsifier-mediated gut barrier disruption, initiates the low-grade systemic inflammation at the root of nearly every major chronic disease of modernity. The protocol is not complicated. 400 milliliters magnesium glycinate 45 minutes before a consistent sleep time. A 90-second movement break every 45 minutes of sitting. 500 ml of lemon salt water upon waking. Caffeine delayed 90 minutes post-waking and cut off by 1 p.m. Fiber first meal sequencing with 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed and a teaspoon of turmeric daily. Graduated elimination of ultra-processed food, 1 category per week. These are not supplements. They are not procedures. They are not prescriptions. They are the conditions under which your biology was designed to operate and from which the modern world has methodically removed you. That is not a slogan. That is the entire orientation of this work. Every video I make here is built on the premise that an informed person, given the right physiological framework, is capable of making decisions that a 7-minute appointment never had the time to support. You have that framework now. What you do with it is yours to decide. Subscribe if you haven't. Share this with someone who needs it. You already know who came to mind when I described Margaret. Drop your age in the comments, and I will see you in the next one.